All right, so here we go. This is a rescheduled conversation that we've been trying to have for about a month now. And I'm so glad, and I'm always fascinated because things happen for a reason. Like I don't even question crazy things anymore. And I used to say to my wife, like, I just had this crazy conversation. And she would say, "Why do you call the new normal crazy?"
Yeah.
So I have with me today Trevor Dunbar. We have been trying to have this conversation Outliers way, but I was trying to figure out because the conversation we've been having over the last month, I thought I knew why we were talking, and then you just hit me with a bunch of other stuff, and I'm like, there we go. This is why. So Trevor, we were just talking about well a couple of things before we started the conversation, but tell me about this book that you just wrote because I think it's going to be really appealing to people.
Yeah. So back in 2019, I think, when Andy Frisella came out with the 75 Hard Challenge, I'd been listening to the MF CEO podcast and I'm like, hey, I'm diving into this thing. I was in a point in life where I really wanted to get breakthrough in whatever area I could get it that I wasn't getting it, right?
Okay, so let's back up real quick. So 75 hard for anyone who has not done it. Very transformational experience. But kind of walk us through like what is 75 hard? I've done it. It's crazy impossible. I know people who've done it's hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. So basically, it is a 75-day no exception rule is a program that you follow, and so it is you have to read 10 pages of a personal development book, two workouts 45 minutes each, one indoors, one outdoors regardless of the time of year, a gallon of water, a progress picture, no alcohol, and you have to choose a specific diet of your own decision, but you have to stick to that diet with no cheat days for the entire 75 days.
Okay, so let me back up with no alcohol. Because I know like so I don't drink a whole lot anymore, and this my impossible this year is to go alcohol free. So I had a Christmas party this year, and I don't drink at my parties. I just don't. Um, Everyone looked at me like I lost either my mind or I had two heads. Um, why the no alcohol?
Alcohol, I mean, first of all, alcohol just as a general rule has caused a lot of destruction in people's lives, right? But it really has become a coping mechanism for a lot of people. And I feel like it actually numbs some of the pain and some of the challenges, some of the adversity that we have to go through to actually develop that mental toughness, to develop that mental fortitude. So, I mean, Andy, who developed the program, might have a different perspective on it. But from my perspective, not to mention the high sugar content, the health benefits. I mean, there's a lot of reasons not to drink a lot of alcohol. But for some people, it's just become a crutch and it's become something that's very difficult for them to say no to. And so when you enter yourself into a challenge, the Christmas party is a perfect example. Many people will fail a challenge like this because they don't have the mental toughness to say no. They give in. Well, what other areas of your life are you giving in? What other areas of your life are you compromising that's keeping you from getting the results you want?
So perfect example as I'm thinking about that is New Year's resolution. So like right off the bat, we're like Christmas party. Oh, well, I can drink at the Christmas party. But then I'm going to stop immediately after that. And then we got the New Year's resolution, which anybody who's ever gone to a gym knows super busy for the first 2 months. Third month, it's kind of waving off. Fourth month, back to normal. So
Which
because
in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the challenge becomes when that inability to be resolute on a decision in your life is not there. Is when you're faced with a hardship or a convenience that is in opposition to a goal that you've set. I've come to the belief that there's no such thing as right or wrong decisions in life. There's just, is the decision I'm making leading to the result that I say that I want? Because what people say they want in life has nothing to do with what they actually get, because it's what they do in life that creates the results.
desperation creates opportunity. And most people are very comfortable being comfortable in whatever the conversation. So we have a mutual friend, Greg, and we're talking last night, and people are comfortable in their own misery
Yes.
because they lack the mental fortitude to be able to go do something about it. which really is kind of the foundation of why I built the show. I struggle with that forever. I mean, the cost of doing nothing, literally there is a cost. And in this 75 hard is a really good example of that. So kind of let's can you walk me through it? And I apologize. Like I'm super
No,
fascinated by this. And before we do, I heard a story Wednesday, and I have a 33-year-old son. He's a brand new entrepreneur. He's hustling, grinding every day. And he called me the other day. He's like, I have $50 to my name. And I said, I love that because you're going to remember that. I said, but I heard a story about Walt Disney. So Walt Disney had filed bankruptcy several times. So his daughter is telling the story that his second time, they're literally in the studio and they're taking all of his stuff out. Like they're taking everything. And he happened to grab a camera as they were taking everything away. And then he got a call from a dentist to create a video for the dentist. He was going to make this thing, and the dentist asked him to come over, and Walt says, I can't. And he asked him why, and he said, I don't have any shoes. My shoes were at the cobbler's downstairs, and they needed a nickel. And he didn't have a nickel for shoes. Those were the only pair of shoes that Walt owned. So the dentist came to see Walt. And obviously, history was made in that first film. He filed bankruptcy again after that. But here's a guy who couldn't even afford shoes. Now, what if he had given up? What if he had lacked that mental fortitude?
yeah.
We wouldn't have anything that we have today with
Yeah, Napoleon Hill calls it the 3 feet from gold syndrome.
3 feet from gold. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So with this challenge, I went through it and it was transformational, but I've been obsessed with personal development for 25 years. And really for a bunch of reasons. One, I want to break generational scarcity in my family, not just financially, but health, relationships. We've just got a path of destruction that goes back a long time. And so in that process, I mean, I've pushed myself to the limits in many ways, and I've constantly, faced failure and that sort of thing. And I hate going to the gym. I'm not a gym rat. I just don't love the gym. I like my freedom. I like my time. However, I like working out. I like being fit and I like being healthy. And so I was like, well, I'd just like to create like a calisthenics program where people just have the freedom to not feel like they need to go to the gym. I mean, gyms didn't really take off to the 70s, 80s anyway, right after fast food was introduced, which is an entirely different story. But I wanted something that I could create a lifestyle around, a formation of habits that were challenging, because the hard part is showing up for yourself every day. I think that's the real challenge, is showing up for yourself. And so, in the midst of that, I kind of started adopting my own routine, which I just called 75 Easy. And so, for the last couple of years, it's really been something that I have played with as more of an idea and a concept. And a couple of weeks ago, I was at a friend's house. My wife and I were hanging out, and I just kind of flippantly told them this idea that I had, because I have 1,000 ideas that I don't always take action on. And there were 6 of us in the room, and they all looked at me like, because I had this whole marketing strategy behind it. I had a whole like thing, and I just been sitting on it. And they're like, dude, you need to write that book. And so I turned 49 on Wednesday.
Wait, it's 49. Like, dude, you look phenomenal.
Yeah, well, I try to take care of myself, but it's like I've also had massive adversity. I'm expecting another child, so we've got a bun in the oven. Previous marriage, I've got 4 adult kids. A lot of things don't make sense on the outside, but I'm looking at my health and vitality and who I want to be for decades to come as a father. I'm like, man, I really want to create a system in my home and a framework that is doable. One of the things I'm guilty of as a father is, because I'm such a high performer, because I have no limits and will just push myself to the bone, I've actually set a ton of unrealistic expectations for my employees, for my children. And I didn't realize the path of destruction that I was laying, because I'm a high capacity person. I had no empathy, and I just wanted everybody to drive as hard as I did. And so that's kind of what birthed this idea of 75 Easy is the challenge and the book that I wrote.
So 75 easy. So when I think about this, obviously we have 75 hard. It's almost like, and I hate saying, the 8-minute abs. Nobody really wants to do the hard stuff, but once they commit to the easy stuff, the harder becomes more attainable.
Yeah. Well, Andy's, 75 hard is a tactical guide to winning the war within, or with yourself.
Yeah.
So I made 75 easy, a practical guide to winning the war with yourself for a lifetime. And so
Mm,
for me, it's just really and I actually see it as a maintenance program post 75 hard. So somebody who's gone, I still am an advocate for 75 hard. I think it's great.
yeah.
Think for those one percenters who want to go and do it, I think they should, because I think that there's a breaking that happens in that if you're a really high capacity person, sometimes you just need to be pushed really hard. That's not the majority of people, though. And there's a lot of people that are looking for breakthrough. There's a lot of people that are looking for, they want health, they want wealth, they want relationships. No one's ever modeled it. We're living in a fatherless generation. We've got unhealthy leaders. Most of us did not have wealth, wasn't passed on to us so we could continue to grow the family wealth. We've all started from zero.
Yeah.
We're so hustle and grind, even though it works and it has worked, it isn't necessarily the best way. And I think,
And I love what you said. So it's almost like we're breaking generational curses.
yeah,
So I mean, there's a couple of things that immediately come to mind on that. So I'm thinking Exodus, because there is a generational curse. I watched it from my grandfather to my dad to my son, and from to me to my son, and we finally broke through. So I mean, for me, it was a combination of coming to terms with who I fail to show up as because a high performer. So
yeah,
as I started diving inside of my own person, I started to find, because I was sexually abused, because I saw a fight between my mom and dad when I was 4 years old in a psychedelic journey, that it shaped everything that I ever thought about money, which I transferred into my own family. I worked all the time. Like that was the most important thing. And then when I couldn't feel anything, I went to triathlon. So I did Ironmans, I did 100-mile runs. And I remember talking to my doctor last year, and I'm like, I'm done. And he's like, bro, he's like, you did that. You've already been there. And now I'm like, I want to go again. Like, I want to run again. And he's like, why? And I said, because I enjoy it. But before I couldn't answer that question. And it was really because I thought I needed to feel pain. Now I just realize I just enjoy. I'm that one percenter who
yeah,
loves to push
yeah.
myself into where that is. So next spring, I'm planning on running another 100. So
That's great. Yeah, and I think that there are people that, I mean, I enjoy that type of thing too, but like I kind of always I laugh and joke because I can be pretty intense. Like you get me in a room with, I can hold my own on the intensity level. But I've learned and grown so much in leadership that I've realized that my intensity is generally too much in most rooms.
mm,
And so learning how even navigating the conversation of Jesus, you've got I have attempted to master the art of relationship where I can come in and not meet people where I'm at, but meet them where they're at. And I think that a lot of times I look at guys like Andy Elliott and David Goggins, these guys are just like over the top, right? And it's funny and they're great and they're getting great results and it's working for some people. I'm not driven by shame and guilt. I don't like being yelled at. Dude, I've been through it, man. I've been through it. And so I know a lot of people do not like that. And so I kind of joke about it as even like, talk to David Goggins when he's 90 and
yeah.
ask if he still feels the same way that he feels now about how hard he pushes and the levels. Maybe he will. Most people, the older we get, the more we recognize the value of the simple things, the more we the value of rest, the more we, the value of time, the value of
Yeah.
not doing things the hard way, letting our
Well,
money work for itself.
well, and it's interesting because if you listen to his first book, and then if you listen to his second book, his tone is definitely softer. I'm a huge David Goggins fan. In fact, it was kind of funny. I was listening to him while I was running a 100-mile run, his first book. But agree, it is very unsustainable for most people. So I had an encounter with my 7-year-old the other day. So my 7-year-old, he's full of emotions, and I love it to death. It's also a bad thing. Like, so he wanted to go to a friend's house and play. It was 7 o'clock. He wasn't understanding that it was time to go to bed. I had to go pick his sister up from church. I said, you can go with me. We can roll, get a snowball, and get some Ritas if you want to do that. But you're not going over there. So he got super angry. But for the very first time in their lives, and in the 27 years I've been with my wife, I raised my voice for the first time. and I shook the house. And he went upstairs so terrified and so traumatized. My au pair is looking at me. My wife has never heard this. I go upstairs and I'm very controlled. I wasn't angry at all. I went upstairs and I said, "How did you like it? It sucks, doesn't it? It hurts. You don't think that mommy and daddy feel pain?" And he sat on my lap. We prayed and it was good. But that was the very first time I'd ever been that intense with my family. And my wife's like, "I thought you snapped." I'm like, that was all completely controlled.
Yeah.
There wasn't
Well,
an ounce of anger.
Jordan Peterson says that a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very, very dangerous man who keeps under voluntary control. So I
Mm.
think there is this element as men that we need to be silent and savage at the same time. And so there are times we have to be able to show up as a barbarian. And there's other times that we have to be more docile and more, fit in. And I think it's learn how to read the room, learn how to read the situation. What level of energy is needed right now to get the results that I'm looking for?
Well, and I think you kind of started that conversation, which is where we started our conversation. So, what would Jesus do? And it's almost like so anecdotal because we used to have bracelets like WWJD.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing. He met people where they were, and I feel like there's this toxicity, and you and I talked about our histories growing up.
Yep.
That if you truly follow the way of the rabbi and you truly follow what Jesus was about, he was that. He met people where they were, but he wasn't afraid to throw some tables around
Yep.
in the Gentile court. So, I mean, there's a lot of story that goes on there, but
A
I,
hundred percent.
but I feel like that's where we have this issue is that we either feel like we have to show up morally right, or we have to show up as that's part of what I see as the biggest problem in the church today is that men aren't showing up as men. They're just showing up as a nice version of what they think God wants them to be.
Well, and I think, Bridget and I unpack this all the time because we're really, we have a podcast called the He She podcast, which is, obviously super controversial, but we talk about identity and we're really big. Like Bridget and I are the perfect picture of masculine, feminine. And, so we really are passionate about identity and we're really passionate about what does it look like to be authentic? And there's such a war on identity right now. And I think that the highest frequency, the most persuasive mode any of us can show up in is our authenticity. When we try to become something else for somebody, we lose power in that place. And so what the church has done, as has society and so many other facets, religion, politics,
Business, everything. Yeah.
education, business, the whole culture, is we've taught people what to think, not how to think. We've taught people what to do, not how to think about what they do. And so I think that oftentimes we've lost the essence of who we are as men and women. We've lost that because we've been trained to conform. Like we've been even the hustle and grind culture. Like I would contend that masters want slaves to hustle and grind so they don't have to.
Yeah.
And if you look at the industrial age and we look at employers and employees, the hustle and grind culture has really been birthed out of employers trying to get their workforce to slave for them. And it's like, and listen, I'm a capitalist. Like I'm all about business, but I'm also about equipping people. And we know that there will be a small percentage of people that rise above.
Yep.
But I'm of the mindset, we were watching a movie the other day and somebody came in, I think it was The Notebook, and somebody came, this poor kid comes to the family table of this wealthy family and he's automatically shunned from the family because he doesn't have money. And my mind goes to, oh man, that would have been a great opportunity for that family to adopt him into the family, teach him about
Show
money.
them how. Yeah.
Here, start investing our money. Let me bring you into the fold, bring you to the family. There's no mentorship like that I'm finding. So we're all starting, and even the guys that are winning are not sharing what they're winning. They're just coming out with their PEDs. And after I made it, now I've got all the time in the world to get buff. And here's what you need to do. And rah, rah, rah. And I'm like, yeah, but what were you doing when you didn't have a nickel to rub together? What were
Yeah.
you doing when you were sleeping in your car? What were you doing when you didn't have food for your kids? Like, what did you really have this routine? Did you really? No, these are all things that came to
After.
be created after the fact, and then they're sold as what caused them to rise. And I'm like, no, I don't actually think that is what caused you to rise. I think you just scrapped it out and figured it out. and now you've like if you had known better then this is what you would have done. Okay, well then just say that. But the reality is most people are not doing things the easiest way. They're
Right.
just not.
No, I mean, and you're so right though, because I I um I belong to it's a club, kind of a country club in Baltimore. It's kind of like the who's who, and I mean, Rachel and I think we joined in like 2007, something like that. Never given back, like never. So I decided that I was, because I'm a veteran, I decided I was going to host this Veterans with PTSD thing, and I had the most incredible people come to this event. People from the community, like there were organizations like Safe Streets that I started to see, and I started to talk to other people, because you can do all of this work, but they go back to their own homes and they go back to their own trauma and they go back to their, because nobody's coming back in to show them how to get out. It's exactly what you're saying. And I am 100% always have been guilty. Like I've never even given that a thought. So I would give money to go to missions, but I wouldn't go to my own backyard.
Yeah.
So now I'm just trying to figure out, like, how can I get involved in my community, because that's what's missing.
Yeah.
And it's every business person who gets out. I mean, I grew up with this poor Mexican kid,
Yeah.
and you kind of try to distance yourself from that
Yeah.
instead of coming back.
100%, dude. I mean, listen, I've had a weird background because I've had a ton of success and I've had a ton of failure. And and I think that I've always had compassion for the underdog because I have felt like an underdog. I created Outliers Way because I feel like an outlier. I feel like an outcast oftentimes. I feel like nobody understands me. Nobody gets the way I think. I've like had to learn to just be quiet in most rooms because it's that, most people want to talk on the very surface. And I'm like,
Yes.
hey, I actually am not looking for friends. I actually don't even like people that much. I don't think, it's like, I want good friends, but I want deep friends. And,
I
but I also want people, I want to be able to help people overcome the challenges that I've overcome because my life could have been so much easier if I had proper mentorship and I didn't.
Same. And it's that we're so similar in that regard, though, because I feel, and I said this, so my wife and I, every Wednesday, we kind of have our own internal date night. I talk about our bathtub all the time. So my wife built this house. Our bathroom, like, I go on vacation now, and my house is better than any resort. So our bathroom is like, I live for Wednesday and Sunday nights, because it's like our time in the bathtub, in our bathtub. She built this gigantic bathtub with a chandelier. It's just amazing. But I get my time alone with her,
Yeah.
like face to face, and we're talking about this. And I said, I feel guilty sometimes that this is enough for me.
Yeah.
Or just having one or two friends that I can have a deep connection with, rather than just going, wide and shallow, because nobody wants to have those conversations.
No.
And even some friends like that we know mutually. Like, I thought that was going to be this one thing, and it ended up being this couple of random text messages a week. And I'm like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
Like, I want something deeper, and I want to be able to take that out into a community
Yeah.
and make a difference.
100%.
Maybe I'm an outlier outcast.
Oh
So,
yeah. Well, that's how Bridget and I mean, that's even what drew us together because I mean, listen, dude, I wrote a personal mission statement in 2007. I'm very detailed on what it is that I want to create in my life. I want to leave a generational legacy for 7 generations. Like
hmm,
you know, and I feel, there's times it's easy to want to give up. And that's partly why I created the 75 Easy Challenge. Because I would propose that even through these basic activities every day, if we can commit to them, get our mind right, get our body right, get our food right, get our hydration right, get our relationships right. There's a path to success or the path to doing things easier. Napoleon Hill said that it only takes one idea to create wealth. And he didn't say it takes hustle, grind, hard work, you know, work harder, suck less, nobody cares. I'm like, man, it sounds like you have childhood wounds that you're yelling at me with. Like you're projecting your own wounds onto me every time I hear these guys yelling at me on social media. I still follow them because there's entertainment factor, but I also want to understand where they're
yeah.
coming from. Because the reality is I felt that way. But I have beat myself up with those words enough times over the years that I don't want to live in shame and guilt anymore. I want to be empowered. And while most people are driven by pain and by the fear of loss, I'm more driven by purpose and the opportunity for gain. And so perhaps that's why it's taking me longer to get some results in life, because I haven't. Yeah, I've always put relationships before money. I've always put certain things that I valued at a high value. So I've 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 lost about a lot of opportunity with money over the years because the method that could have been used to make it didn't align. Now, other people would say, dude, it's just go make money. And like, I get that, but there's just something inside of me
Yeah.
that doesn't allow me to deviate from the path that I know God's put me on. And I know it's my choice, but I feel like there's a very deep eternal purpose that I live with every day. And if I don't show up daily in that space, even writing this book, it's like I laugh because how many ideas have I, faith without works is dead. You can have all the faith, you can have all the hope, you can have everything, but if you don't put action to it, then it doesn't actually turn into anything. And even in prayer, I've got, another book we're writing, but it's a process that we have lived by that the Lord gave me years ago is 5 keys to effective prayer. And the keys are position your heart, remove distractions, expect encounters, believe what you hear, and take action. And I would contend that a lot of people get through the third or the fourth steps of that, but then they doubt what they heard, but then they don't ever take action on it. And I would just like, if you're a friend of mine and I'm asking you for advice and you give me advice and I don't ever do anything with that advice, it won't take long before you stop giving me advice, right?
What do we call those? They're ask holes.
Assholes, yeah. And so think about this between you and God. It's like, hey, if I'm going to God for wisdom and he's giving me a strategy, he's giving me a plan, he's giving me ideas, and I'm hearing it and I'm doubting myself and then I'm not taking action, at some point, I feel like he's just kind of like, hey, listen, I gave you 6 different things. You're not listening to me anyway. So let me just tell you that I love you because I do. And we'll just keep our conversation at I love you and my grace is sufficient. Because I'm not going to give you direction anymore because you're not doing anything with what I've given you.
So there's a couple of things that I'm thinking immediately there because we had to go here because I knew we were eventually going to get here. When we talk about the feeling of worth. So from the very second that you're born, you're told what? All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. You're worthless. You can't get to God without all of this. The Catholic Church will tell you this. Christianity will tell you this. So you're automatically in a deficit the second that you're born.
Yeah.
True? So
100%.
and then you're
a sinner and you'll never be good enough.
never be good enough. So, and then you have this idea that prayer is just like you're almost rubbing the genie. So I had this conversation the other day with, oh Lord, please give me this or for that person in that person. So it's like you're kind of rubbing the lamp.
Yeah.
And I was listening to Neil Donald Walsh, Conversations with God. I'm listening to it for like the 10th time right now. It's like my go-to. And it's like he's having this conversation with God, like what you and I are talking, and like the conversations I have. Like I literally in my prayer stack will have this conversation with God, and it just kind of flows through. I come back, I look at it, I'm like, that's because I really didn't remember the conversation, but it's kind of the same thing. But then I remember in part of the book, he's talking about all these ideas, like kind of what you're referring to. And she's like, well, and the voice of God was like, I gave you that idea. That would have been a great idea for a book. I thought it was funny. And he's like, well, I thought you were. And it's like, why does everyone think that God, don't have a sense of humor? I gave you humor.
Yep. 100%.
So we put God into this box.
Yeah. And we're missing the mark on it, man, because I think that's where, dude, we're just missing the mark. I mean, obviously, I wrote The Good Pult.
I wanted to get into this one.
Yeah.
So we have 75 easy. You just launched it when?
Just launched it. It's like literally, yeah, it's just like just freshly published. I'm still doing a couple edits on it, but yeah, basically just in kind of a nutshell. So there's basically 7 rules to follow on a daily basis. And just to make sure I don't mess them up, I'm going to pull them up here. Yep. But basically the idea is these are just basic disciplines. It's interesting. My wife and I created a coaching framework that we use called the Breakthrough Blueprint. And in this framework, it's heal, transform, create. We talk about think, see, do, evolve, purpose, power, provision, practice, identity, health, wealth, and relationships. So we have an entire framework that we use for coaching high-level executives down to doing corporate training and just to helping people find freedom and breakthrough, no matter what place they're at. So whether it's someone who's more of a faith-based place, we can go a certain direction with the conversation. If it's somebody that's just like corporate scene, I just need you to come in and get results. We work on helping them get successful bottom line results, right? And so a lot of these rules were really wrapped around the blueprint and how in what we do. And also, you and I familiar even being with Warrior, Garrett's got a whole structure that he kind of puts in place called the Core Four. And so the daily rules that I put in place are number one, 30 minutes of exercise. Now, just 30 minutes of exercise, and exercise to me is activating your muscles. And so I've got, I've got 7 breakdown chapters just to give people a little bit more context. Those who maybe aren't familiar with working out, or what does exercise look like? Is it okay to just walk or jog or do push-ups and sit-ups? And so I basically break that down, but just 30 minutes of exercise where you're activating your muscles daily. You can do this at 100 years old, and you can do it at 35. Second is to drink a half gallon of water. Realistically, we should probably be drinking about half of our body weight in ounces of water if we're operating in pounds. But then those who are operating in kilograms, it's just too confusing. So I'm like, man, a gallon of water. Some people should be drinking a gallon of water, but most people aren't drinking any water. They're drinking soda and energy drinks. And so half gallon of water is really easy to do. It doesn't take much just to keep some water. 10 minutes of meditation, prayer, or visualization. And so this is an actual consciousness of slowing down and getting into a state. This isn't just your typical Christian prayer where you're talk. This is
Lord's Prayer. The Lord's
no, this is meditation.
I talk to a lot of people who are like, when I meditate, I just say the Lord's Prayer over and over. I'm like, well, and I think there's a misconception too that you can't empty your mind. I've heard Christians say that if you empty your mind, then the devil's going to like take over and
all kinds of
infiltrated.
fear around that. And so some people are afraid of the word meditate. Some people are afraid of the word prayer. Some people are afraid of the word visualization. Top performers all around the world in athletics and in business, they use meditation and visualization. It's just what they do. In fact, there's studies that would show that results are just about the same with people who only visualize and don't practice in sports and practice. And so the power of the mind, and going back to Napoleon Hill, think and grow rich. Think and grow healthy, think and have better relationships. And so meditation is one of those things that most people don't do. They don't understand. Realistically, I think all these things are set as minimums. And what will happen is a lot of people will start adopting these, and then maybe it'll turn into 15 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day or a morning and a night. But hey, we're just talking, let's set habits here that work.
Baselines,
baseline. So 10 minutes of meditation or prayer, 10 minutes of reading. And so this is personal development, nonfiction. It could be the Bible. It could be a growth book that somebody else has written.
So it's any book rather than
It's any book that's going to, that's going to develop your mind in a fashion that's moving you forward, right? And then 10 minutes of writing, and this is the process of actively writing down, because my dad was diagnosed with dementia at 71. And so a lot of this too is founded in like, hey, what if my dad had adopted habits when he was my age? Could he have avoided this diagnosis? And I think yes, absolutely. He didn't drink water; he drank Coke, and then he found Coke Zero that was sugar-free and healthy, and that was the health drink of the house. He didn't ever do mindful meditation or prayer. He didn't write. If anything he was reading, it was smut, on the news, and it wasn't like good mind bending type stuff.
So as you're saying that, I'm thinking about my dad. So my dad still works like every day, and he said that's what keeps him alive. So he's 76 years old, and he's still out there HVAC, heating and cooling every day. Still reads the Bible or archaeological, and I love it because he and I get into a lot of biblical conversations based on traditions and the laws and things that were going on at the time, and he's like the master. We went home this summer and for Christmas, and there are all these books that he has. And I've always joked and said, when you die, like I'm cleaning all these things out. So he gave me like Josephus, so the historian Josephus and the antiquities. He gave me all of these books that I have wanted since I was little that I have seen him read. So kind of the same thing. I read 40 books a year as a minimum. So I kind of divide them into spiritual, personal development, and business. and I do that every quarter. But for somebody who's never read, I mean, 10 minutes is like, that's really not a lot.
It's not a lot, but it's life changing if you do it
Yeah,
over the course of a year, because 10 minutes a day is 60 hours a year.
that's amazing.
Yeah. So like imagine how much different your mind is. And so if our mind is like a muscle, and when it stops being used, it stops growing. And just like our physical muscles atrophy, our mind atrophies. And
Mm.
so the meditation, the reading, and the writing to me are just skill sets. And if you're a business person, I mean, there are some people that have built multi-million-dollar businesses just writing a daily email. And so there is value in putting your thoughts, your reflections, and the things down on paper and just getting into discipline. There's no such thing as creative block. If you're just telling stories or writing down things that you've learned, eventually it just starts to flow and your mind's being activated.
And I think that, I mean, I think to that point, I think some people might feel, who wants to hear my stuff? Who wants to hear my story? Who wants to hear my creative? Because I've actually heard several people say, oh, I'd love to write a book about my memoirs. And I always say, well, somebody would probably want to hear that. They would want to see
Yeah,
that. It would definitely would touch their
100%.
lives, and you're underselling the value of who you are as a person. So I think ego can be good and bad.
Well, I think that when we come to a place of humility, we recognize that the value of our experiences and our lessons learned is actually selfish not to share those with people. And because
Yes.
there's 8 billion people on the planet. And so someone might not like me, resonate with me. They don't like my hair. They don't like the way I talk. They don't like my beliefs, but I can share something I know with you and they all like you. And so now you can use that same knowledge to change their lives. So there's nothing new under the sun. King Solomon said, right?
Yeah.
All these aren't new ideas. It's just being repackaged in a way that can be delivered. And so, like another book that I wrote is the short form book Moneymaker Method, because I believe every leader should write a book because your story matters. And to your point, even the writing, I mean, someone could take 10 minutes of writing a day, and without even trying, they could write a book in 6 months,
Yeah.
or 3 months or a year or whatever it is,
And
right?
it doesn't necessarily have to be like just sitting down. So I mean, I remember when I wrote my first book about healthcare, I cheated how healthcare stole the American dream. I did it while I was running.
Yeah.
So I would just voice to text my outline, and then I would think about like, okay, this chapter, I had the outline, and I would just start talking. And then I would come back in and I would use Otter, and then I'd kind of reformat everything that I said. I'm like, wow, this actually makes sense. So over a
Yeah.
course of about 7 months, I wrote a book just because I was running a lot.
Yeah, and there's some great apps that can help you do voice to
Yeah,
text and then transcriptions. And so there's a bunch of different ways, and this to me, this I could talk about this one rule for an hour
I love that.
and the
So
value of it, but I just think it's activating your mind, putting your value, your stories, your experiences on paper, and it's going to help you remember things better. It's going to help you learn the lesson at a deeper level that you just learned. Like if I'm reading through a personal development book, or I'm reading through your story and you captivated me with a different angle on something, and I'm writing down my reflection on that, like I've just embedded that into myself. The next thing is eat what you say you're going to eat.
hmm,
And so here's my rule around eating is just eat what you say you're going to eat and be aware of what you're eating. And so most people eat unconsciously. They just, they eat what they eat. They're not looking at labels. They don't know how many grams of sugar in it. They don't know what chemicals are in it. They don't know the adverse effects that it has. And most people, because we've been trained and conditioned, especially as Americans, just to be sheep that are herded, cattle that are being herded through, and so this is just about becoming mindful about the food that you're putting into your body. And so drink alcohol, don't drink alcohol, but just do what you say you're going to do, and actually become aware of what you're putting into your body. Because I think if someone's going through this challenge and they're following a rule that says eat what you say you're going to eat, that means that you're going to actually have to have a conscious thought about what I'm choosing to eat today.
yeah,
And so, hey, we're going to a party today. I'm not going to have cake. And then the cake shows up and you're like, oh, that does look really good,
yeah.
and I eat it. Oh, well, is it bad that you ate the cake? No, it's bad that you didn't do what you said you were going to do, because now you don't trust yourself. And we already live in a realm where we don't trust other people. But when you can't trust other people and you can't trust yourself, now self-doubt just compounds, and certainty is the only thing anybody will ever pay for. So when you just undermine your level of certainty by breaking your own rules, breaking your own commitments to yourself, you've literally just you've decapitated yourself. You've like literally you've broken your relationship with your spouse, you've broken your relationship with your kids, you've broken your relationship with your body and your money, all because of one decision. And someone would say, well, it's not that big of a deal. I'm like, listen, these aren't hard rules, but are you showing up for yourself every
Yeah.
day?
Because it compounds. So if it's
It
cake,
compounds.
where's it not showing up in other areas?
Yeah, it's if you're going to eat cake, just don't make that commitment to yourself in the
Yeah.
morning and then you're good, right?
Yeah.
But this is just the idea behind this rule is to get people consciously thinking about what they're putting into their body because we have, I mean, we have a very high obesity rate in America, and most of it is just because people really aren't paying attention to what's going in their body.
Yeah. I used to work in the wellness space, like, so 15, 20 years ago when worksite wellness was all the rage. The company that I worked for, Principal Financial Group, had bought a wellness company. And I remember I was 205 pounds. I never exercised. I never gave one thought about what went into my body. And I've been in healthcare for, at the time, I think like 20 years. And I said, just tell me what the wellness plan is. I'll sell it. It'll be great. I'm just a really good sales guy. And they're like,
Yeah.
no, you actually have to go through it. And when I did, I was like, wow, like I didn't know what an HDL, LDL, I didn't understand how triglycerides went in any of that. None of that really mattered. All I saw was I was 205 pounds, and every year I had a decision to make. I could buy a bigger pair of pants, or I could just go lose the weight. Well, we all know what everyone always does because it's just easier to buy a bigger pair of pants.
Yeah.
So I made some very, very small changes. And what I learned through all that was everything on the outside of a store is of value, of nutritional value. And again, I think it depends on the store because I'm thinking of ours now. They've put a lot of their frozen food section on the outside to make it convenient. So in the older days, anything that was packaged, processed, or refined or enriched was all in the middle of the store. So it was all the meats, dairies, and fresh fruits, everything were on the outside. So if you just stayed on the outside of the store, is what we would tell our clients, that was all the decision that you really need to make. So when I adopted those, I went from 205, never exercising, to very small things. I was 179 the very next year, not really doing
Changing your
anything.
diet, just changing the food you're putting
Yeah,
in your body.
yeah,
And literally, the one habit of not to shop on the inside of the grocery store, but to shop on the outside, this is a conscious decision that dropped 20, 30 pounds.
yeah. So, and I am 54. I'll be 55 in November. I am right now probably the heaviest because I'm doing a lot of lifting and trying to gain. I'm trying to get to 190. I've had a runner's body forever, so I'm 183 right now at 54, and I still have a 31-inch waist.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. It's funny. I tried to pack on some pounds. I'm at 190 right now, and I feel good, but I don't want to be heavier. Like I'm not trying to walk around at 200, 210.
Yeah, exactly.
It looks good, but it's just for me, I want to be healthy, man. Like I want to have I'm going to 120. Like I laugh about it. I'm like, I believe I can live well into my hundreds.
Nice.
And so everything that I'm even building around my life, stem cell patches, all this stuff is like I'm focusing internally and saying, hey, what do I want to pass on to my kids as a legacy? I want health. I want them to have time with me. I miss a lot of time, the first round. And, there's still a lot of trauma that my kids are dealing with because of how much I was working and gone and emotionally absent. I don't want to be that person anymore. And I want to be able to heal those past wounds. And now moving into, having more kids, it's like, no, I want to make sure that I am present and active and happy. And so eat what you say you're going to eat. It's a big conversation, but it's a very simple rule. And there is no rule other than you just make a commitment to yourself. And then, and I create awareness for people who, listen, I'm not a nutritionist, but you know what? Part of the thing, when I was in Chicago, I was running and I had really bad foot pain. And I was going to all these doctors, all these specialists, geniuses with, doctorate degrees. And I was like, man, they couldn't figure out what was wrong. And I said, you know what? I think it has to do with sugar. And they said, nope, sugar has no correlation to the pain and this and that. I'm like, yeah, but I know that like I love peanut M&Ms. And if I eat like a big handful of peanut M&Ms, which I used to all the time, I noticed that the inflammation in my knees and my feet and my joints is worse. And so I ended up cutting sugar out and all my pain went away. And so when that happened, I began to not trust any doctor. I don't care what your certification or degree is. In fact, most doctors are 40 pounds overweight. So I really don't care about the medicine you want to give me to cover up the symptoms. I want to know the root issue of why I'm not feeling good to begin with, right? And so,
Yeah, definitely. And Peter Attia, he wrote Outlive. And it's a really interesting book because when you're talking about that, I mean, just to even think about how the early stages of septicemia and blood poisoning. So there was a doctor who said, "Hey, maybe there's something to none of us are cleaning or scrubbing up before we're giving delivery to these children in the early 1900s, and everyone's dying." And they laughed at him like, "You're absolutely crazy." He published some studies. They told him he was a lunatic. He ended up like being committed and lost everything. Well, 50 years after that, they're like, well, maybe he was onto something. So now everyone scrubs and sterilizes and walks into an operating room. But
it's always the outlier. It's always the
yeah,
minority, right? The minority is always right. In a lot of
yeah.
these things, it's like the one person who's got the idea. All right.
Yeah. So yeah. So I mean, yeah. So
Yeah. And the last rule is just make a deposit into a key relationship. And so, we talk a lot about, relationships being like a checking account. And if you try to withdraw money from a checking account that's overdrawn, not only are you not getting the money that you're looking for, but there's a penalty involved with it. And relationships are often the same way, whether it's a romantic relationship is with the child or it's in business. If we try to draw off of a relationship without having first made a deposit into that relationship, not only will we not get the thing we're asking for, but we'll actually open the door for them to be able to pick up offense or resentment. And so it's a double compounding, double-edged sword. And so by the simple act of making one daily deposit into an intentional key relationship that you want to keep in your life, whether it's in business or marriage or in your family, it's once again consciously recognizing, hey, relationships are the true gold in life. If you don't have health physically and mentally, money and relationships don't matter because you can't fully enjoy them. But if you have but in all of that, if you have money and you don't take time for relationships, that also is a endless level of defeat and
and
depression.
you see it. I mean, there's an inverse relationship between all of it. It all has to be interconnected. Now, as you're saying this, could you do one or two of those at the same time?
100%. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's just take the action. There's 7 steps. I'm a big numbers person. Seven's the number of completion. I just feel
Yeah.
like there's like, if you can just consciously take a look at these rules every day, it's 60 minutes of your day. If you can invest 1 hour a day into self-care and then
Wow.
just be self-aware for the rest of the day on what you're putting into your body, then your life can radically change. And I think that I'm excited about this. I actually, it's such a simple. I've got all these ideas, and this is like the most simple idea I've ever had. And
That means that it's probably the best idea.
yeah,
So, I mean, truth is simple.
yeah, and I think that we've got our vision with Outliers Way is really to we want to help people to find true freedom, make more money, and have more influence. And freedom comes in identity, health, wealth, and relationships. And identity is like our connection with God and who am I? What's my certainty and self-confidence? And then that plays into everything else. But and I've been like a basket case. The people ask me, "What do you do?" I'm like, I don't know, dude. I'm just a crazy person. Like like I've never really had a good answer for that question. And what Bridget and I have been talking about recently is like, she's like, Trev, you are a great model of health and of, you take care of yourself, you take care of your body, you take care of your mind, you care about your relationships. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of very wealthy businessmen, especially who um, like I have authority with them because of what my life looks like. Now they make 100 times more money than I do, but I can bring so much value in other areas. And I think that I have overlooked, I've never once thought that I wanted to be a health coach or a whatever. But what I've realized is like, oh no, I actually just have natural authority in that because it's the life that I've lived. And then that brings them into my world. So we can help them write books, or we can help them heal from father and religion wounds through the good culture. We can help them tap into faith, and learn how to actually lean into trusting God when things seem like they're falling apart. And so it is funny. I'm excited about it. Um,
I can see that. I mean, when you're talking about this, I can actually feel the frequency coming from. I was actually, again, kind of going full circle. Crazy conversations aren't crazy anymore when they're normal. So I get a call this morning. It's a voice to text. It's another partner that I'm working with that is in the psychedelic space because I'm facilitating him. And we've talked about this. He's actually at a 3-day ketamine retreat right now. And to just hear the frequency and the love in his voice this morning. And I'm like, I'm listening to the transcript and I'm showing it to my wife. I'm like, how did I get here? Like, how? And then I had this event last week and I was talking to one of my presenters. I'm like, how did I? And he's like, you chose to put yourself here. And that's what you just did. You
yeah.
chose to put yourself in the game.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been a fight. Like, but it's funny, I've got so much intellectual property I own and frameworks that we've created. And so now it's beautiful because it's like this tapestry that's been put together where I've been looking at the backside for so many years and it's just been a big tangled mess of yarn. But I feel like the tapestry is now getting turned around and I can see the print that's actually been created. And so for the last 25 years, I've been developing myself. And in that process, I've actually created the life that not only do I want to model for my children and live myself, but now I actually, with a ton of empathy and compassion, can show up in simple selves. I mean, nobody wants hard. And I think that even like as an example, I live in the woodlands in North Houston, and it's a very affluent area, and there's a lot of money around here, but there's very little health. And there's a lot of executives that they're not even leading their teams well because they're not healthy. They're not managing their mind, they're not managing their body, they're not managing their relationships very well. And if I can even just come in, that's where I kind of do life coaching for leaders. And I do facilitation and consulting for their teams where I can come in and actually, because I've done corporate training for several years, but now I can bring our frameworks, I can bring all these basic tools in and I can help the leaders get results and I can help their team get results because at the end of the day, most people just want more money. They want more freedom, more influence. And so, okay, let me just start with the most basic common denominator, which is, hey, how do you feel about yourself right now?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's so simple. But for the last 25 years, you've just been honing the simple. So, and it sounds like you're there.
Yeah, for 25 years, I've just been sharpening the axe. It's like, and I didn't realize that. I've had a really close relationship with God over the 25 years. So there's been a lot of, like, I've found a lot of revelation. Even, we started to tap on the good cult. This is my origin story because I wrote my first book 18 years ago called Living on a Shoestring. It was when I was going through bankruptcy and I was losing everything and I had a bunch of money stolen from me from a pastor and his friend and all kinds of stuff, right? And then that led me on this journey of 18 years. I was still a leader in churches, but then I was on a prayer walk probably 6, 7 years ago, and I just felt the Lord say, "Hey, Trevor, you know that Christianity is just the good cult, right?" And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, yeah, religion, it was never my plan. The kingdom of God is a realm, not a religion. Men have tried to control and package me for their own benefit, not just for personal gain, but for understanding. And the reality is, there's a whole realm of understanding that people aren't tapping into. And so that was another book I sat on for years and finally decided to write. And it's interesting because really it's really talking through my process of purpose, power, provision, practices, lifestyle. It's tapping into like even just identifying the deception that we live in, the puppet master that's pulling the strings around us all the time. We've been taught to just do things and to go along and conform. And like I love, you're on this journey with plant medicine to help liberate people through this. You found hope and healing in a process that worked for you. Religious people would tell you all day long that, dude, you are the devil.
So I'm writing a book, right? Actually, I'm finishing my edits today called Walking in the Garden, Discovering God Through Psychedelics. And I remember sitting down with, fortunately, I mean, I have an incredible church. Like one of the pastors I love this guy, and he listens to the show. So I'm not saying that just because I know he listens to the show, but we sat down over lunch one day and I shared this idea with him. He's like, "Wow, very
Yeah.
controversial." And I said, "So what do you think?" He's like, "I think it's awesome." And we ended up going to dinner, and he wanted to just know more. But there was no condemnation there. There was a natural curiosity. But then I posed this question, and I posed this question to my wife last night. I'm reading the history right now of a woman. Her name was Maria Sabia. So Sabina. So she's the one who really kind of, if you track Western plant medicine, there was a guy named Albert Wasson, big hedge fund investment banker guy. He infiltrated this very small community in Mexico for his own profit and gain. Basically ruined this woman's life. And he promoted psilocybin, magic mushrooms, what the psychedelic experience was. She had been practicing this ritual for thousands of years that had been transferred through the Aztecs. So my question is, and I said this to her, if Jesus was 2,000 years ago and she's practicing medicine that connects to God from an ethnogen, which is what it is, connection to the soul, around the same time, does that mean that people aren't going to heaven? Because they didn't say the magic words of Hamana Bamana, Jesus come into my heart.
Yeah.
No one seems to have an answer to that. So, but for thousands of years, people did plant medicine to connect to God. I mean, you can even read Plato, Socrates, Aristotle were all part of a secret organization. And they were the ones who really kind of created the idea for the soul, the triune of a person. It came from the Greeks, and they were part of a secret culture called the Eleusinian that took this psychedelic drink in order to connect with God.
It's interesting. Well, I mean, now I read the Bible. I believe in the Bible. I believe it's inspired by God. And I also believe there's a bunch of other books,
Yeah.
the Book of Enoch is an example that, interesting. It fills in a lot of gaps in Genesis,
Have it on my
Right?
desk. It's
Yeah.
actually, yeah, it's the book of Jasher, which is actually referred to in Joshua
Yeah.
and in Paul's writings. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting because Christian theology has taken this inspired word of God and they've created a bunch of rules around it. It's interesting to me with Christianity is that the Apostle Paul said that sectarianism is a sin.
Yeah,
Christianity is the definition of sectarianism.
definitely.
And so, like, to suggest though to a Christian that you're living in sin because you're a part of a religion called Christianity. I mean, this is a funny thing. When I wrote the short form book Moneymaker Method, it's equipping outliers to write kingdom outliers to write, publish, and monetize a book, a nonfiction book, right? But in part of that message, I'm like, hey, I don't need you to agree with my message, but you have a message. You're a messenger. Your message is this message.
Hmm.
And so I am hated by the Christians and I'm hated by the unbelievers because I love Jesus. So I'm understood by very few. And so all that I'm saying is like, hey, listen, if I can put my message out without fear, then you can put your message out without fear. So if nothing else, if me writing the good cult and proving that, hey, what people think about me is less important than what God thinks about me. I was talking, I was in prayer the other day. I've wrestled with this because in business, I live in the Bible Belt now. And it's like, a lot, my viewpoints, if you take the time to get to know me, I'm a pretty likable guy. But if you just hear my viewpoints at face value, you could write me off pretty quickly in most cases. And so me being aware of that, being in the Bible Belt, and we were making a lot of Christian friends around here. We've, whatever. I'm like, man, I found myself wanting to shrink back because I was afraid of not being able to make money if I was authentically myself.
Hmm.
And I was in the hot tub praying one morning, and the Lord just said to me, He said, will you say what I want you to say, even if it means you never make any money? And I go, yeah. He's like, all right, good. And I want you to go speak to my messengers, because there are people, it's the outliers. Like, you've gone through fire, you've been hidden in the caves of transformation for decades, and now people need to hear your voice. we are living in a fatherless generation, and we need mothers and fathers who can rise up and say, hey, this is my journey. This is what I came to. This is the revelation I came to understand. This is what I've learned about the Father. This is what I've learned about money. This is what I've learned about health, wealth, self-confidence, certainty. I mean, my frame's been shattered over and over and over again because I've been willing to go into that space. Well, it would be selfish of me now not to share what I've learned. And it's not for everybody, but for those who are drawn to my message, I can add high value to them. I've been mentored by billionaires, and I've sat on park benches with homeless people. And so like I have this diversity. I've shaken hands with world leaders, and I've also, been just trying to figure out what to put on my table for my kids at a time. So I'm so grateful for all the experiences, but I can step into a room with a $3,000 suit and fit in. And I can also just throw on some shorts and go sit on a park bench. And so now I didn't recognize the gift in that as I was going through it. But now I'm like, oh man, I'm actually when we were in Israel years ago, a friend of mine said that we're God's Mossad. We're like the special forces for the kingdom. And so this is kind of like kingdom outliers are these outliers who are on a mission to actually find truth. It's the truth seekers, the freedom fighters, the pioneers. And so those are the people that my message will resonate with, but it's going to offend most people, and most people will reject me, which I'm good with. But I'm finally at this place of going, oh, if I don't show up as myself, I'm actually being extremely selfish, because there are some people that need exactly what I have, just like there are some people that need exactly what you have. And if you don't put your book out, if you don't put your podcast out, if you don't put your message out, then who's going to suffer because of your selfishness, because of your fear?
I remember kind of how this whole thing began. So I had shared the story of being molested. And I remember having somebody say to me, "What took you so long to tell my story?"
Yeah.
And that really was the launch for me. And since then, I've had so many people independently, privately. And what I've learned is that 30% of all men have been sexually abused, and they don't tell anyone about it. So, I mean, just by being able to say that and to be able to heal from that has made a difference in other people. And as you say, kingdom outlier, and it's interesting you use the word truth seeker, and those people who question, because if you really look back at the Old Testament, and you really look at every single character that we put on a pedestal as a patriarch, they all questioned, every single one of them. And I even joke about Gideon and the fleece. So, all right, God, if it's really you, I need you to put I need moisture on the ground. I need the lamb's wool to be wet. Well, now I need the vice versa. I need to do it again. We never really do that anymore. We never wrestle with God. We don't argue. We don't.
Yeah.
And when I was kind of alluding to my prayer conversations, there are days I just get smacked down. Like God's just like, all right, I've been telling you this, and you're an idiot, and you just need to, shut up and listen. So,
Dude, there was a season, Don and I have gone rounds. There was a season where my prayer life consisted of what the F,
yeah,
what the F, because that's all that I knew how to pray. And this is where, even like in the Christian theology, a lot of the framework, the sinner's prayer, born again believer, like they're all fancy titles and names. And I understand what they're trying to convey, but it misses the essence of just having a relationship with the Father. It's understanding Jesus as King, understanding the Holy Spirit and the dunamis power that's been placed inside of us for the working of miracles, for the creation of wealth. We were created not to be less than and never good enough. We were created to have dominion and authority on this earth. And so go back to the beginning and read what God had planned.
His image.
Then got involved.
Yeah. And that really is the whole purpose of why we're here. And this was the conversation I had in my last podcast. We're here to create heaven on earth.
Yeah.
We're here to create a garden, in effect.
And we've got a bunch of escape artists who are just like, escapism is the key. And so I'm just going to wait for Jesus to come save me. I'm like, no, why don't you learn some stuff and go create, expand, have dominion? Like, this is what you're created for. We are creators because we're created in the image and likeness of our Father who creates. Jesus was an example, not to that we couldn't live up to. We actually, within the context of the authority that's been delegated to us, we have the opportunity to create. He said that we would create better results, do more things than he did. But it starts here. It goes right back to the beginning of our conversation. So this is why I'm so passionate, because even through 75 Easy, those who don't have any sort of a God consciousness or any sort of a awareness of how powerful they actually are and what their minds can do, you do a year worth of connection with God, meditation. We start dripping a few other things here and there. And here, let me show you this guided meditation that might help you. We was eating the elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah.
How much more change can we bring? Nobody wants to be smacked over the head with the Bible. They want people to meet their practical needs and then get invited into a deeper conversation. Hey, that's actually really interesting that you said that. Can you unpack that for me a little bit? Next thing you know, relationships formed, right? Hey, try reading this book, or have you considered doing this? Have you considered plant medicine? Everybody's path is going to be a little bit different. And I think out of fear, Christians have failed to live into the fullness that God created them for.
I think what's crazy about that though, I don't even think it's just Christians. I think so. When I talk to people, they're like, I just keep it way, way down. Like it's just like, why? Like, so Bessel van der Kolk wrote a book called The Body Keeps Score. The body keeps score. And if
Mm,
you're not honest with yourself and open and 100% honest about where your experiences are, the body is naturally at war with itself. I mean, that's just the unfortunate reality.
yeah.
So, I mean, so I don't think it's just Christian
Yeah, you're probably no, you're definitely right. It's all humanity. Christianity
humanity.
is one vehicle that's been used. So
Yeah,
you've got religion, you've got government, you've got education, you've got
yeah,
arts and entertainment, you've got the family unit. I mean, the
yeah.
same thing, man. I was molested when I was 15. I was on a family ski trip. I was on a ski trip with one of my dad's better friends.
Huh.
And he pulled me into a room, and I lived in shame for 20 years. I never told a single person for 20 years about that. Not a single person for 20
Wow.
years. And it impacted me at a level that I never even understood, but I just learned how to numb out pain. But here's the problem with numbing pain. I ended up getting into the fire department. I spent 13 years in the fire department, and I could handle anything that came my way, and I felt like that was a strength, right? But the reality
Compartmentalizing,
was,
yeah.
I just had learned to numb out pain so much that it didn't affect me. The problem with numbing pain is you can't be selective. You can't numb pain and still have pleasure. If you numb pain, you're also numbing pleasure. So I just became a very not happy person, because I had learned to numb pain. I'd also learned to numb pleasure. Fun was not a part of my life, so then I just became determined to do a great thing in the world. And so now I'm finally coming to the place. It's funny, even with this book, 'cause I'm like, this is the dumbest idea that I've ever had of all the ideas I've had. And yet it's the one I can actually have fun with. It's the one I can actually just show up and talk and laugh about. And fun's never been a part of my life. It's just all been serious grind. And going back to that molestation, going back to words that have been spoken, I people tell me that all I cared about was money, and so then I had a self consciousness about feeling like I was too driven for money, which has kept me from making money. Our certainty determines our prices. Even as coaches and consultants, what's the difference between a $5,000 a month coach and a $50,000 a month coach? The certainty,
Yeah.
what they know they can deliver to their client. So you got people that are charging $25 an hour and $25,000 an hour. And really what comes down to it is, who do we believe that we are? Who are we, and what are we
Oh my
capable of?
gosh, 100%. So yeah, 100%. And I think that was one of the things. So in IFS, in facilitation, we call it's IFS. So, and it's really the protective model. It's the protector of separating your heart and your mind. So your mind naturally will block out anything else. And what I found in my first plant medicine journey, I actually found my heart. And I talk about this in my book. I was actually walking, God was showing me this dirt trail, and I looked down and my heart was laying on the side of the road. And I actually say, there's my heart. I haven't seen you in such a long time. And when I picked it up, it actually blossomed into clover. It was the most amazing thing. And then in my second experience, like I've now left all this baggage. I confronted my abuser. I've actually called my abuser. I forgave him after 48 years. And then I have all this peace. And I'm like, wait a minute, like I don't know what peace is because like I've never had it. So I have another experience, and then I'm on the same dirt road. It was just crazy. So God is now saying, I kept looking back, and my bags were, they were literal suitcases that were sitting on this dirt road, and it was all my baggage. I'm way
Wow.
up the road now. I'm way up, and I keep looking back, and God's like, why are you looking back? You left those there. Like, it's time to go.
Yeah.
Like, stop looking back. And I feel like that's what we naturally do. Like, we start to liberate, we start to transform, and then we're like, wait a minute, this is peace. I don't
Yeah.
like this feeling. I'm not used to this feeling. So yeah, it's a crazy thing.
It
So
is crazy. That's a powerful story. Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. Like you and I have talked about in the past. I mean, I think just like science and in science and the spiritual realm are just, they're just making such connections right now. And I think it's funny because I'm a knower. Like there's a lot of things I don't know why I know what I know. I don't feel like I'm that smart. I'm not, I wouldn't consider myself an academic. I don't feel like I have a great memory. There's just things I know. And there's other people I can sit and listen to them talk, and man, they just drop facts. And I'm like, dude, how are you so smart? But I also operate off of a gut feeling, so I just know what the right way is to go oftentimes.
mm.
And I'll just
And
know.
that's actually usually more important because the academics are going to be the ones who rely on that and are risk averse. So my wife shared a story of Barbara Cochran, just turned 75. She had this statement that says, always trust your gut.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, like it doesn't matter whether there's right or wrong, but do action. So do it. So
Well,
rather than,
this started happening for me when I first started reading the Bible, I I would read things for the first time and I already knew it.
hmm,
And it was like there was a knowing inside of me. I'm like, yeah, I already knew that. And then I came to understand that the word of God's written on your heart. And so when we come into this place, that we already have the word of God has already been stamped on our heart, but very few of us are tapped into our heart. And so, yes, is it good to read? Is it good to study? Yes, but that Bible could go away and you could never see a Bible again. None of the people in the Bible had a Bible, so it's like they seem
so
to
I was
do.
actually just going to say that. It's so awesome.
They seem to do okay, but I think that what I realize is even in life, like I'll get into conversations with guys like you, you've gone down the rabbit hole of studying certain things, and I'll just be able to say things, and you're like, yeah, well, let me tell you why that is, and let me tell you why that is. I've not studied stuff
Yeah.
necessarily. I just have my experience have created a belief system, but it's funny how often everybody operates differently. And it's funny how often when we can trust our gut, we can trust our intuition and show up and be willing to share. A lot of people like me they won't share in a room because they feel like their opinions aren't valid. These are the ones that won't write their book.
Yeah.
But I would contend that your opinion is very valuable. And a lot of times the things are profound, and the simplicity in which you know them is the most profound part. Albert Einstein says that simplicity is genius, not complexity. And so,
100%. So, and have you seen Jesus Revolution?
yes.
No, so just watched it again Monday. So so again, I go to this amazing church. Like a whole crazy, we talked about my toxic Christianity on the show. I talk about it all the time. I had zero interest in God. I had no interest in going to church. I'm driving by this place. God says, go in. I'm like, nope, not doing that. Drove by again, second time, nope, not doing that. Third time, my kids are in the back seat, and I'm like, okay, Rachel's in Florida. She's running a half marathon. We go. The very first thing that they say is welcome home. I've been there for 2 years, 2.5 years. Now I have a bunch of friends who go. I have baptized my daughter. I watched my 7-year-old get baptized. My wife got baptized last year. Our au pair just got baptized on Sunday. And this kid I met on Facebook 6 weeks ago got baptized on Sunday too. So to be in my world,
Yeah.
God is a very central, fundamental part. So we decided to watch Jesus Revolution again because my church is doing this at the movies. So they actually take a movie and then they pull out the biblical principles of the movie. It was Back to the Future, Shawshank Redemption. I mean, it's really cool movies. But so we do Jesus Revolution, and he's sitting and he's watching all of this stuff. He's watching these anti-war protests. he's watching these religious leaders on the screen, and this is a pastor. And if you remember, they're on the couch, and he says, I just don't know who to believe. And what does she say? The truth is always quiet.
Yeah.
Truth is always simple.
Yeah.
Everything that's complex is not. It's not truth.
It's so good too. Yeah, and I think it goes for, I believe that confidence is quiet and insecurity is loud. And so I think this is something else, we started this podcast talking about some of the hustle culture and some of the alpha gurus and whatnot. And I think a lot of times insecurity is being projected at a very high decibel, and when we no longer have something to prove, that silence is actually the certainty that sells. In the same way that simplicity is really what we're all searching for. It's the silent, confident, and humble person that I really want to learn from. I'm not really trying to learn from those that are like jamming their beliefs and do this and rah, rah. I'm more like seeking out the person in the room that's observing people, that doesn't need to be seen and heard, because they're typically the ones that have what I want. And so, in the same way, like the silence, even going back to meditation and being still in our mind, there's an essence to being still. There's an essence to being silent that very few pick up on.
And I mean, going back to the 75 easy, just thinking about that. So I write a letter to my wife every morning. She never reads them. They're not for her. They're for me. It doesn't matter how pissed off I am at her the night before. And there are nights like I just like I mean, 27 years. So, but I write her a letter every morning. The very first thing I do when I get out of bed is I get on my knees and I actually just for 3 to 5 minutes, I pray for the excitement of the day that I got to wake up, and whatever the opportunity is that presents itself, it is. But then I pray for her. So not only do I write her a letter, but I put my hand on her and I always pray for her. So that 75, I mean, that's why I was asking, I mean, can you do a couple things at once? Just writing.
Yeah,
What I
100%.
have found is that the writing the letter to her was more for me. It was more about how I perceive not just her, because what I found in all of that is that I see a beauty in her that I would not otherwise know that I would look for. But
Yeah.
just being able to spend that 10 minutes in the morning, and sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's 2.5 pages, some days it's a half a page. So it's thank you for the bathtub, thank you for, whatever. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of cool.
Have you ever read, oh, now I'm drawing a blank. It's by the Leadership and Self-Deception
Hmm.
by the Arbinger Institute. So I read this book years ago, and the basic premise of the book is that we oftentimes will objectify humans and make them non-human. And it becomes self-deception. So as a perfect example, like a story is, let's say a couple is laying in bed and they've got a newborn baby. And dad's been out at work all day, mom's been home with the child. It's 11:30 at night. They're just getting in bed and the baby starts crying in another room. The man immediately has a thought. I should go and take care of the baby because my wife has been home with them all day. Waits 5 seconds, does not take action on the inspired thought, and immediately he flips his frame and he's like, she's not even sleeping. She's pretending to be asleep. Doesn't she realize how hard I've worked?
I
Doesn't
worked
she
on
realize what I
exactly.
do?
I knew you were going there. Yes, I
Yeah.
worked all day.
And we do this, we fall into self-deception oftentimes because we fail. This is what I would contend. We fall into self-deception because we fail to follow our own intuition. And so the Spirit's speaking to us all the time. But when we disobey that thought and don't take action on it, we now are at odds with the very truth that was spoken to us. It's like walking into a grocery store and seeing trash on the ground and thinking to yourself, I should pick that up, and then continuing to walk past it. Now you get about 10 steps past it, and what's the thought? People are such slobs. These people are so, I can't even understand why people would do this. But the original thought was one of, hey, I want to contribute.
Yeah.
And now the thought moves to, I just want to condemn. And so, how do we move to contribution to condemnation? It's all within us. And so, the same thing when we decide to show up for our wife in the morning, it's like you're humanizing her. You're taking her to the Father. You're presenting her. You're finding gratitude in that space. And so, I think it's beautiful. But I think that this is, man, these little practices, I'm telling you, they can shift generations if people will just adopt them.
Absolutely. Because I joke with my kids now, like, so we met 27 years ago, August. We were just college kids. And the joke is that my wife and I, we met actually moving freshmen into the dorms. So I was president of my fraternity, she was in a sorority, and she kicked my shoe. We just happened to be moving freshmen together. And we were in a hallway during a break. We were ordering pizza. I sought her out. Like her smile was just like I like she was my soulmate. And I still like radiate whenever I talk about her. So anyway, I tell my kids like, yeah, mom kicked my shoe and was like, hey, baby. So it's like we have this joke, and my kids are going to know 27 years. My first son doesn't know that. So he remembers coming to live with her when he was 6. We were brand new married. She was 22, who decided to take on this enormous role with this kid. She's amazing, but my kids will never know what that earlier version of me was like.
Yeah. Yeah, we learn a lot. I mean, I was in a 25-year marriage and 4 kids, and it was not my idea for the marriage to end. But in hindsight, like I'm really glad that it did,
Yeah.
because now it gives us both the opportunity to heal, grow, and my wife now, Bridget. I mean, she also had a marriage that didn't end the way that she wanted. She had a stillborn child, and it ended up like her husband kind of went off the deep end, and so emotionally abandoned. So we both came from stories of
Mm.
pain, but dude, we're two peas in a pod. I mean, we love each other so much, and there's just so much honor and respect and love and connection. And we've had a really hard year. Just been a lot of adversity that's come up. We got married a year ago. We just celebrated our 1 year anniversary, and we've known each other for 4 years. But with the grace that we've handled everything that's been thrown at us, it's just a testament to that emotional connection. And like when when the true love falls into order and there's honor and we show up for each other, we show up for ourselves, it's amazing how much easier hard times become. And it's, you've been through your own journey of pain, but having that soulmate, having that partner, I think marriage is very underrated these days. A lot of people don't want to get married because they get this picture of marriage as awful. It's a ball and chain. I would contend that the wrong marriage definitely can be, but you don't know if you don't try. And I cannot imagine not being married to my wife. I cannot imagine the empowerment that I feel just by feeling that love and that acceptance and that, go get them tiger mentality. Is like, hey, you got this. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And having someone in your corner like that is really powerful.
No, I think we almost ended several times. Like we just couldn't. I mean, over 25 years with me, I had a lot of baggage. I had a lot of worth things that I brought to the table that I mean, I really I don't want to say traumatized, but I don't want to minimize what I did either. There was a lot of trauma, a lot of projection of my insecurities on her. I robbed her of a lot of joy. Um, so in the effort to heal our marriage, I talk about this couples journal that we did, and where I actually I finally, for the first time, said I was molested. That brought this into a conversation about going back to the very beginning, authenticity and vulnerability. I believe most couples don't succeed because they don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to really be authentic with who they are. So they project a version of them that they don't usually even know themselves. So we had the benefit of actually going through plant medicine together. So she was in a completely separate room, but she was actually in my experience. So when I talk about the dirt road, my wife was there. So like in a different room, but in my experience. So as
Wow.
she is talking, she's praying, I'm hearing her. And I finally asked her to leave my experience because I needed to work on myself. But she was so ingrained. But I had heard so many people say, well, when we get to this thing, if we're not supposed to be together, we're not supposed to be together. And I really believe that. And I said that to her. I'm like, well, hey, maybe God's just going to break us up. Like, like just like that flip. But what I realized in the medicine is that I never got to see a version of her either. And when I
Yeah.
met her for the very first time, because we came back together, I saw her for who she was. I saw her soul. It was so much more beautiful than what I ever met 27 years ago.
Yeah.
And I see that when I look at her now. It's just like I see the version of who I know she is, not the version that she projects.
I think that's really powerful. Yeah, I mean, thinking back on my first marriage, I mean, there's definitely things I could have done differently, and it's like the path of growth and just even learning how to navigate through all that pain with empathy and understanding and being able to go. I mean, it's funny, man, because I feel like I'm the 49-year-old with 89 years of experience, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I've gone so hard at life. And I think that a lot of times I felt disqualified because things weren't working, and now it's more like even just hearing you talk about, how you've decided, you made decisions that kept in the game, and now you've got a marriage that is on fire. You couldn't imagine having a better marriage, but if you had not chosen to do the deep work, to go heal, transform, and create this
Yeah.
new experience, you would not be living in that reality. And it requires two people oftentimes to want
Yep.
that transformation. But yeah, it's powerful, man. We're passionate about relationships because we just really believe, hey, it's been hard for me to find really good relationships. I have very, very few relationships.
Same.
And like even the ones that seem like they're relationships, I'm like, are they really? Because like there's just not that many people that are selfless enough to be a really good friend.
It,
You
it's almost like the Facebook. You have 5,000 friends, and I look at that. I'm like, no, I don't. I,
No, yeah, I mean, I heard Justin Bieber in an interview one time. It's like, he, like everybody loved him and he was completely alone. It was just like,
yeah, he had wrote a song about it too. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just like it's just so relationships are important, man. Like and this is even like kind of going back to the church conversation. We were created for fellowship. So I think there's even been an attack against relationships in a significant way. Families being turned against one another, business partners being turned against one another. I mean, we work better in collaboration. So it's just interesting how many collaborations fail because we're not united in spirit, we're not united in intention, we're not in, there's a purity that many people are lacking, and that purity I think can only really be extracted through the fire of transformation. Like purity comes through removing the layers of guilt and shame and pain and mistakes, off of us. And I think that if we can choose that path and come into a place, even how you and I have united in the way we have, it's only because of authenticity. It's
Yeah.
only because we've both chosen to show up completely vulnerable and authentic with one another. That's like, oh, we need to do this podcast. But that's a perfect picture even of marriage. It's like, we're not going to find that unity if we don't actually try to understand one another or try, you've got some things that kind of challenge the way that I think about certain things. I'm like, oh, instead of being offended by those things, I'm just like, oh, that actually makes me think differently and try to see a different angle and different perspective because I'm not actually trying to prove anything. And you're not trying to prove anything. We're just being one with another. The three ways of listening: agree, disagree, and be with. Oftentimes we'll just agree with the people. We're not
Yeah.
thinking that we should agree with them.
Or you'll agree with it when you're like, no,
Yeah.
I don't really
Or,
believe.
or we'll
Yeah.
just
Like,
disagree and we shut off everything.
yeah. Like, I don't agree with that.
And
Like,
I'm more like, I would rather just be with you and experience what you're experiencing and extract whatever I can out of that conversation. Because if I can do that on a daily basis, even through prayerful meditation and reading and writing, I'm going to become a better version of myself every day that I can pass on to my kids.
and I feel like that's where I think that's where a lot of I think you hit it on the head. A lot of relationships fail because it's always about two things. One, when am I going to get what I want to say out first without even listening to anything that you're saying? So you could be talking and I'm going to automatically, I want to say what I want to say. And I don't even want to listen. But two, but I don't want to put myself in your place. I want to be right, because society today says that we have to be right. And I used to say to my wife, I wanted a relationship where I could just tell you everything and we would be okay with it. No, that's not really what I wanted. I wanted you to agree with what I said, and I wanted you to justify
Yeah.
or make me feel justified. I didn't really care what you said. I just wanted to feel like I was right. So
Well, it is the great human addiction. Well, but and rightfully so, because here's the thing: is we have to. This is why transforming our mind is so important, because the great human addiction is the need to be right. And oftentimes you can be right or rich, you can be right or happy, like right oftentimes does not get you what you want, but we have an addiction to being right because of insecurity, because whatever we believe to be true, that's the foundation we build our life on. And so if I question the foundation that I've built my life on, I become unstable. And so I'm actually afraid of being wrong because I'm afraid of discovering something that would undermine the very thing I've built my life on. And so religion is like this oftentimes. Oftentimes you'll talk with religious people and they don't want to have an intellectually honest conversation out of fear. There's a deep rooted fear. Like, I have to be right about what I believe because I've banked my entire life on this. And so I think that when we can remove fear, perfect love casts out all fear. If we can come into a place of, hey, whatever I discover and learn, I know it's going to be for my best interest. Now we can begin to break out of that need to be right. And it's like, oh, yeah, even like the political divide. Like, right or wrong, I got my opinions, but they're not really relevant in most circles. It's like I don't need to prove. Help me understand where you're coming from, so I can even learn how to communicate with you, or learn if I don't even need to communicate with you. Because there's just some people, it's like, hey, this conversation's over. I don't need to waste a breath or an ounce of energy on this. And there's other times it's like, oh, had I listened for understanding instead of needing to be right out of fear of being wrong,
yeah.
we can actually form a real united bond.
And we could actually learn something, because like you said before, like, so if maybe there was a side that I hadn't even considered, where you're gonna have an honest conversation with me, without emotion, and you're gonna be able to explain to me why you believe what you believe without the need to be right. And if two people came together to not be right, yeah, I mean, then we have collaboration and communication.
Well, this is probably what some of the Stoic philosophers did,
Yeah.
and it was more of a, hey, I've got this idea. What do you think about this?
And I
But
feel like if you
they're the
really go
think
back and, yeah, you go back and understand church customs, they didn't have a Bible, like you said. They had a page or they had a chapter, and they argued about it. Like, so the community would have, the rabbi would actually stand up there and they would read it, and then they would argue about it.
Yeah.
And that was okay, because there was no right or wrong. They wrestled with it. They ingested it. They lived it. They breathed it. They understood it, but they all walked away like, hey, got my interpretation. Cool.
Yeah. It's good, man. Well, I think even these types of conversations, I think, are so powerful because they unlock our ability. Listen, our world, I don't watch the news, so I don't,
Same.
I've tried to guard my mind, but there's like some craziness going on right now in our society. And I think now more than ever, we need mental, physical health. We need money. This whole idea of scarcity does not work for families. We need relationships. And I just think that this is really, and it comes down, we have an identity crisis in America. And everybody's wrestling with understanding who they are and afraid to come out. And so guys like you are willing to put your story out. And and I'm attempting to do the same thing, but we need to start having more of these conversations. We need to get more people telling their story, because everybody's story matters. In fact, if you do buy into scripture, it says that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. In other words, we overcome because we've been given authority through the sacrifice of Jesus, and because we're willing to tell our story. It's like, there's just some simplicity that should mic drop for most people. It's like, oh, come into the authority and dominion I was created for by the sacrifice and blood of Jesus Christ, and then go share my story of transformation so others can be transformed by themselves.
Which is what the early church did.
Which is what Jesus said to do. He said, make disciples of all nations. To go and model this, cast out demons, raise the dead, heal the sick. And
Yeah.
you'll do greater things than I do if you'll just believe. If
And
you
the actual translation was in your everyday walk. It wasn't like we're
every
supposed
day.
to put on this mission cloak and go out and your everyday walk.
Yeah, the idea of missionaries, where it's like my life is the mission field. It's
Yeah.
in your everyday way. It's
Yep.
as you go, and so as you're in business, as you're in marriage, as you're at the swimming pool, as you're on the beach. And these are the key relationships I think are most. These are the most serendipitous relationships I've ever found in my life. Have oftentimes been just they just showed up out of nowhere, and it wasn't something that I tried to craft or form. And we don't know how people find us on the web, or
Yeah.
what measure led them to our website or whatever it was. I mean, there's a much bigger play of destiny at work that we're not even aware of.
Always is. It's so funny. So I was kind of referring to this kid I met on Facebook 6 weeks ago. He was on a mutual guy, a person that we know. I happened to say I lived in Baltimore. He's like, "Oh my God, I live," and he literally lived like around the corner from me. So 3 days later, he and I are having lunch, and I'm hearing his story, and I'm sharing mine. And the next thing I know, he is attending our church. And then we were having a conversation, and I said, "So you're looking to be validated? That's the word that we're all looking for, validation."
Yeah.
And he said, "Yes." That was it. Without anything else, not being willing to put himself into anyone else's shoes. He just wanted to be validated.
Yeah.
We all want validation without willingness to look at each other and where our walk was. I did it for the longest time with my parents. Like I never understood. My dad left home when he was 15. He joined the Navy and went to Vietnam at 17. I have zero idea what my dad has ever seen, but my dad has never shared, but I've never looked at it from his perspective.
Yeah.
My mom left home when she was 18, big Mexican family, huge, got married, both of them very, very young. No idea what their story was, but I never even considered it. So never asked, but none of us do. So if we did more asking and we did more listening.
Man, if we could, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that, yeah, it even goes back to that quiet confidence. I don't think most people have the capacity to listen because they are so afraid of what they'll hear.
Mm, yeah.
And so that fear actually is keeping them from most of the results that they want in their life. Because when we can actually only seek validation from the only one who should be able to give us validation, then I no longer need validation from you. I also don't need to be an a-hole, but I don't need your validation. And so I think that this is there with that quiet confidence. I call it soul level certainty. I say there's circumstantial certainty, and there's soul level certainty. And so circumstantial certainty is what most gurus and coaches are teaching today: is get up when you say you're going to get up, work out when you say you're going to work out, do what you say you're going to do, right? That will build results, and it will build circumstantial certainty because you're proving by results that you can do what you say you're going to do. But the challenge with stopping at circumstantial certainty is that when all hell breaks loose, which it often does, what you thought was certainty was actually a circumstantial certainty.
Mm,
And when you can tap into its faith ultimately, but you tap into a higher power, you tap into God, you tap into this soul level certainty that no matter what my circumstances say, I still know who I am. I still know how I can show up. I still know the value that I can add to your life. That certainty sells. That's the certainty that caused Jesus to be the most spoken about man in history. Love him or hate him, it doesn't matter. He's arguably, well, you can't argue the fact that he's the most famous man who's ever lived,
yeah.
loved and hated because of his certainty, because of his faith, because of his connection to the Father. And that should be what we all should be seeking.
Well, and so you had said something earlier that when people ask you what you do, that's the first thing that people ask. Like, what do you do? So our Western culture, our philosophy is what? It's do, have. There's not even a be in there.
Mm-mm.
So, but if we were to be, have, or be, do, have, then it would be interesting.
Yeah.
Because then it's who are you? Like, and not what do you do, but who are you?
100%. And when you operate from that place, so within our breakthrough blueprint, I've got another trademark called Ablenomics, and it's the law of ability. And it's a 24 module resource module. And it teaches you resourcefulness thinking. So it teaches you about finite resources and infinite resources, right? And in this place is not only understanding the different categories of resources that we can tap into, how do we practically take the concept of Think and Grow Rich and connect it in our daily life of resourcefulness? See, we're not trained to be resourceful in life. We're trained to, I don't know what we're trained to do. We're trained
Well,
to,
I talked about like my kids about this all the time. So I used to think like the 5-day work week. I went down a and you're right. I love rabbit holes.
yeah,
I go down a lot of them. I'm that kind of I have to know
I
everything
love
about
it.
everything when I'm on it. So we actually used to work, the average person used to work 68 hours a week. Henry Ford was the first one who created the 5-day work week to the 40 hours. So we went from 68 to 40. So the guy is a hero. I mean, just like automatically we shaved 28
Yeah.
hours and we work 6 days a week. So it was often 10, 12-hour days. So do the math on that. But what were the schools doing at the time? The schools were teaching us to manufacture. So reading, writing, arithmetic, you were only taught to be able to go work the line. Like that
Yeah.
was it. Like our school system today has not evolved since what it was in the 20s when we were largely, and you hit it right in the head. When we emerged into the industrial age, dad left the farm for the crown to be the cog in the wheel of somebody else's crown,
Yep.
basically. So they're all being taught this. So I talk to my kids about this all the time, like reading, writing, arithmetic. My 9-year-old is flying an airplane. So like, I mean, I want them to learn marketing, copywriting. I mean, those are the skills that they're going to need to know.
100%. Communicate.
Connection.
So yeah, no, that's good. Well, within this thought module, because really it's software for the human mind. So it's rewiring your mind to think resourcefully. But in this thought module, imagine the center of the circle is ability. And then you've got this timeline of life, opportunity, time, right? And this is what we all have. But in the center is ability, and then it goes to savings, money, assets, resources, thoughts. Now, most people start in the middle of this thought process with their ability. I want to do X. I'll look into my savings account and say, oh, I can't do that, or I can do that, right? Based on savings, then I'll look and see, do I have any revenue streams coming in? No. Seldom do they even get to assets, never even think about resources, and their thoughts become self-defeating.
Yeah.
So if you follow this timeline out and reshape, invert the way you think and start with your thoughts, and through reflection, convert your thoughts into resources, resources into assets, assets into money, money into savings, savings into ability, we actually can do all things through Christ who strengthened us, not just some things. But we have not been taught to think this way. We've been taught what to think, not how to think. And I believe that one of the things we're passionate about with the Breakthrough Blueprint, Ablenomics, 75 Easy, is like helping people get unlocked to find true freedom and think resourcefully, make money, have influence, be free, enjoy your family, recognize that time and money aren't connected, even though we've been trained to believe that they are. You know, there's a lot of lies that we've been told by society that we're living into as a culture, and it's creating high suicide rates. It's creating mental illness. It's creating broken relationships, you know, between children and parents and spouses and business associates. Man, we just need to slow down, back the train up for a minute and take an honest look at what's going on and say, okay, well, what do I want the next 20, 30, 50, 70 years of my life to look like? Because if I keep going down this track that I'm on, it's not going to end well.
No, I'm reading a book right now called The Anxious Generation, and it's validating that. And it wasn't COVID. We all immediately want to blame, but the research has shown that it was actually years before that. So that just kind of brought it to a head, and really, I think, brought the problems to the surface because we were so isolated, but they were there already. So, and we are a very anxious generation. We are the wealthiest, saddest, poorest people on the planet because we've never really, and I said this to somebody, we've never really had adversity. We have the three primary things: food, shelter, and protection. We do. Like we've never had in this country, even to some degree, our homeless population, while that is a huge problem that I hope one day to be able to help solve, isn't like other countries where they don't even have running water
Yeah,
or they don't even have a place to sleep. I mean, it's we don't even know what poverty is in this
yeah.
country. We have zero idea.
It's definitely a subjective conversation.
Very subjective.
Yeah.
But I mean, this has been amazing for me. I knew this conversation was going to be great. I feel like we could do this for 5 hours. It is so amazing. Um, I want to bring it back full circle though, because you had said a couple of things a couple of times on why I created this. So what does freedom look like? That was the premise of why I created this show. So we were
Mm,
at an event and I remember coming home to my wife and saying, "What does freedom look like?" She didn't have an answer. I didn't have an answer. Because I think you come to a place where you chase and you have the have it all lifestyle, which is where we met.
yep.
But then I think you come to a point where you transcend the have it all lifestyle to the have what matters lifestyle.
Yep.
As Coach Brennan King, one of my prior guests, has actually said a couple of times on the show, that you start to understand what matters.
Yep.
And then you become more aligned with that. So, and this conversation was what freedom looks like.
Yeah.
So it's being able to be authentic, to be vulnerable, and there is a cost to doing nothing. I mean, we both live that. So
Right.
you could live in scarcity forever.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't break out of it.
Trevor, thank you so much. How do we find you?
Yeah. TrevorDunbar.com is the easiest way.
Perfect.
Yep.
And then I will post in my show notes the Outliers Way. You have a
Yep.
lot of great resources, and I'm super excited personally to be able to do the 75 easy. I
Yeah.
want to, it's going to be good right now. I tore my hamstring, so I'm like lightly rehabbing right now, but still riding the bike and lifting weights every day. But the 75 easy, I definitely want to take the challenge myself, and I want to post those results on the show.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. That'll be, so the funnel will be up for that today. And yeah, and we'll have different resources. Excuse me, create a tracking guide and just a way just to make it really simple and fun. Yeah, and I'd love to hear your results. And if other people end up doing this challenge, I mean, I would love, Bridget and I would love to hear the results, because we really do, we're just passionate about transformation. And we really believe that this can help. So we'd love to hear feedback and
I
results.
think it's going to be amazing. I think it's one that we're going to definitely promote on the show, and I'm definitely going to promote it in my media feed. I think it's going to be, I think it's just fun. And I think this conversation has been one of the most insightful ones I've ever had. And I've had, I mean, it's been a really, for me, it's been kind of a cool thing to be able to watch this the transformation of my show. And, somebody had actually said to me, if you look at my very first several, I really lacked that confidence because I was struggling with the imposter syndrome. I was trying to
Mm,
figure out who I was. I really didn't have an identity in Christ. I didn't have an identity in myself. And then just to kind of watch that it's not really about me anymore. The show is really about you and about the people who listen, because there is a cost. There's a cost to doing nothing. And, I feel like the title says it all, but you demonstrated all that here today. So thank you so, so much.
yeah, no, thanks for having me. It was an honor.
TrevorDunbar.com, and I will post Outliers Way. You have a lot of incredible resources. And then more importantly, 75 Easy, we're going to journal that ourselves. So thank you so much.
Awesome. All right, thanks.